Whenever you are.
I'm going to let the thing go up.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Mary Jean Murphy at My Favorite Quilt Store, and you may be watching this because you are doing the My First Quilt class, which is a great pattern designed by Margot, written by me, or you may be watching it because you're just kind of interested in what's going on here. I'm going to get right to it because we have a lot to talk about today, and I want you to get as much as you can out of this video. So the center square of the My First Quilt class is actually applique, and some people think that's kind of a dirty word, but it is not. Applique is just a different technique, and there's many styles of applique. I think there is a video out there for My Favorite Quilt Store which actually will show you how to do applique by machine, but not Mary Jean Murphy. I do applique by hand, and I'm going to teach you how to do it today too. So back to there's many styles of applique. I'm going to show you just one style today, which I think will be, I'm going to say more of a beginner style. It's a lot less prep work, and I'm going to get right to it, and then we'll talk about why I want you to learn this way. So our block is actually the center block, and it is going to be this heart. This is the background fabric, and this is of course, the heart fabric. And this is a very easy technique, and there's lots of videos out there. So don't just look at my video, look at other videos, but here's how it goes. So you take your pattern. I have made this pattern a little smaller so that it is doable for me kind of to show you. So it's not so much that we can get to a couple of different places in this block. So I'm pretending like this is the pattern. Of course, it's smaller than the actual pattern, but here's my heart. I brought some different fabric because I think it's a little easier to show you on something that's a little more contrasting. So this is my background fabric, and this fabric is going to be my heart fabric. I chose these two just because they were contrasting, but make sure you follow your pattern precisely so you get the best results that you want, that will go perfectly with your quilt. First step is to take your pattern that you will be appliquing and turn it right side down. Now I don't need to do that because my heart is exactly the same on both sides, but I want you to remember that if it's right side down, and your background fabric is also right side down, it's going to come out exactly like your pattern. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over today, and then I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to put it right side down. I've already traced this heart onto my fabric, but you just take a pencil. We have these great Sewline fabric pencils, or you can just use a regular number 2 pencil, yellow pencil that you would use in school, and you literally trace on the back of your fabric. You just take your pencil, go right around, all the way around, and trace it onto the back of your fabric. So what you're doing is you're transferring your pattern exactly on the stitching line onto the back of your fabric. And at this point, I don't need this anymore. So I'm going to take my fabric, this is the right side up, and I'm going to place my applique piece, which is my heart, directly over top of the drawn line. And I want you to double check that the drawn line is clearly within the boundaries of the piece that is going to be appliqued onto the front. And you can tell because you can see through this fabric. If you can't see through the fabric, go ahead and hold it up to a light, put it on a light box, or take it to a window. That is the best way to see it. Sometimes if I'm doing this in the car, I'll put it right on the car window. And I can tell just by looking at this that my heart is within the boundaries of my applique fabric on the front. The other thing I do want you to look at is sometimes the fabric is directional, so make it pleasing to you. It's whatever your eye wants is what you can get. There's no right or wrong. And I'm going to just take a pin and I'm going to place it so that the fabric on the front does not slip. So the reason why this is called back basting is I'm going to actually take thread and I'm going to baste that front piece on to the background piece from the back basting. And the thread I'm going to use, I use this, I think it's called spaghetti thread. It's a 12 weight. You can also use a heavy, maybe like a quilting thread or a piece of pearl cotton, a piece of cross stitch thread. But I'm just going to go ahead and take this thread and cut myself a piece off. And with a needle, like an embroidery thread needle, it doesn't have to be any special needle. Okay, I've got my needle threaded. I'm going to knot it at one end, and I'm going to put an obnoxious looking knot on the end. And you'll see why in a minute. So that's a big knot. There's no reason for that kind of knot anywhere but in this application. And I am going to start from the needle in the front, and I'm going to just sink it right on that pencil line. And I'm going to pull it up, and the knot is nice and big and on the front. And what I'm going to do is I am going to baste just regular size stitches, just a running stitch, and I'm going to baste it all the way around. So the reason why I like this application is because there's not a whole lot of prep work. Once you get this basting done, pretty much your prep work is finished. There's other kinds of applique that do require a lot of prep work, and maybe there's not as much waste of the applique fabric in that application, in that technique of applique, but this one seems to be the easiest, and really and truly, or maybe I'm only wasting a couple of inches of fabric. I'm okay with that, to make it just nice and easy for getting it ready to go. I mean, I just think this is very simple. The other kind of techniques are, of course, the starch, where you take the front fabric, the applique fabric, and you maybe put it around some, some template fabric, some heat-resistant template fabric. You may put it around freezer paper. I've seen people do it with freezer paper. I'm going to just point out, I always try to sink my needle right into the points. See how this heart comes down and makes this like inverted point? I always like to go ahead and put my needle right in that point. And I will say that this is the time to be precise, and this is the time to take it easy and do it exactly the way it should be. Neatness counts in this step right here. And I'm just going to continue around just the way I've already done. Hope I have enough thread in this, but I think you'll get the picture even if I don't. I can pretty much take these out now too. There's also another type of hand applique, and that is called needle turn. Now, the needles nowadays are not like the needles of your grandmother. The needles nowadays are much thinner, they're much sharper. In my opinion, they last a little longer. I've never been able to really get a handle on needle turn applique. I don't think it's as neat, and I don't think it's as precise, mostly because when you're turning that fabric around, making the seam allowance, you're really kind of growing the applique piece on the front, and it may just be very minimal, but it's still a little bit bigger, and it might not matter in something like this heart. However, if you were doing 4 or 5 pieces on top of each other, which if you're doing something like a Baltimore album or anything that's got several pieces like right up against each other, I think it just needs to be a little more precise, and I've never been able to achieve that with needle turn. So I do prefer this, but I'm going to tell you that it's not the only technique that I would normally use in a larger block. There's techniques on doing vines that are very easy. Can you do back basting on all of them? Sure. Do you want to? I think once you learn how to do the different techniques, you probably will use several techniques in each block. When you come to the end, I've gone all the way around my heart. You take the needle and just go up to the front. And I want you to cut yourself a long tail, and that's pretty much long enough. You no longer need this needle, so I'm going to go ahead and sink it and put it away. Now, I think everybody can see, I hope everybody can see, that you can now tell exactly the way I want my heart to be on the front. This is the sewing line. This is seam allowance not included, because this is going to be your seam allowance out here, and this is going to be your actual applique piece. If it's confusing to you, just go ahead and take a pencil and let yourself know exactly where the waist is. And like I said, the heart is not really that hard to tell. Back to a heart, I think doing a heart as your first project for hand applique is really very difficult. This inverted point is very difficult, so please remember to give yourself a little grace when you're doing this. I'm going to take my scissors. I love these Karen K. Buckley little scissors. They have serrated teeth. Mine are years and years old. I bet you I got these, I bet when they first came out. And I am going to show you. I want you to just cut this piece out with seam allowance. And I do maybe a scant quarter. I think a scant quarter is probably the correct amount of seam allowance for this. When you get to the inverted point, I can't get quite in my hand. When you get to the inverted point, just kind of give it a 1/4 of an inch all the way around, and we're going to deal with that later. And I'm going to finish doing what I'm doing. Try to take long cuts too, not so choppy. This is not critical to be neat, but neatness always is better than messy. Okay, this is my waist. If I was home and I was not doing this for a demo, it would be a lot less, but today that is my waist. I'm just going to go ahead and put that aside. Now I think you can see exactly the way this heart is going to come out. I'm going to take my Karen K. Buckley scissors. They do come in different sizes too, but I do prefer the little small ones for this small piece of applique. And I am going to snip down into that inverted point. I think you can see it if I do like this. And I am not going to go all the way down. I'm going to leave a couple of threads. It doesn't matter if you lay this piece, and this is for almost everything but vines. Vines is very fussy in whether it's on the bias or if it's on the straight of grain. That's something we can deal with later when we're doing something with vines. But for a piece like this, I think I'm pretty much on straight of grain because this is kind of a directional pattern. But if I wanted to turn it and it be on the bias, that's okay too. Okay, let's talk about needles. I like a number 10 straw needle. Number 11 is also great too. They come in a pack. It's a little round container. Looks much like this, and there's probably 16, maybe 12 to 20, depending on the size. And they come just like this. You can buy them in a pack. I have a very hard time because these little eyes are very, very small. So I use a needle threader. There's all kinds of needle threaders out there on the market. I even have one in here. It looks like this. I just prefer the little, I always call it the little sewing machine needle threader. And there's also different kinds of thread. I prefer this superior thread. It actually comes in this little bobbin keeper, but I brought one to show you that this is my own bobbins with my own thread in. It's superior thread, like I said. I think it's probably a I'm going to say it's maybe a 50 weight. It doesn't say on the, I'm going to pull this out and show you. It really doesn't say on here, but it's called Masterpiece. And I think it's a 50 weight. And I'm going to just pick something that matches my applique piece. And this one, that one looks pretty good. So let's put this aside. And I'm going to go ahead and thread my straw needle. Now I'm not going to do this whole piece for you. I'm going to show you a couple of techniques, and there we go. The same stitch, the felling stitch, is what you use in hand applique. If you are not familiar with a felling stitch, you could probably look it up, and there's YouTubes on it. I'm going to show you the way I do it, and if it's something that you would like to do, then go ahead and use the felling stitch. If you have a stitch that you're very comfortable with doing hand applique, there's really no rights or wrong here. I prefer the felling stitch because you don't see the stitches on the piece that you're working on. I think it's a more hidden stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and dock my thread, and you're all going to laugh because this is the tool that I'm going to use. You can find this in any restaurant or grocery store, and it's a toothpick. And you wet the toothpick. Toothpick in your mouth. This is where you keep it while you're hand appliquing. I've had many people ask me if I've had steak for breakfast, why I have a toothpick in my mouth. Well, for heaven's sakes, I'm hand appliquing. The wet part of the toothpick actually is a little rough. And when you use the toothpick with the fabric, it grabs the fabric a little better. The dry part of the toothpick is nice for smoothing. I would imagine there are hundreds of products out there that is being sold to do exactly what this toothpick is doing. And you can get 100 of these in the grocery store. Or if you lose it while you're on a car trip, just stop at a restaurant and pick one up. So it doesn't matter, when you take the toothpick out, it dries like that. You can use it once, put either end in your mouth, it'll be fine. I'm going to do it this way. So what you do is, and I'm going to go ahead and take the scissors and just show you while my toothpick's getting wet. You pull out the first stitch. Just take it right out. And I pull the basting thread back, take the toothpick wet end, and tuck it in. Don't worry about this part right here. You've got this knot here that is keeping you from doing any sort of pretty tucking. But what you're actually looking for is you want that fold to match this line. I think if you look at it very closely, I think I've achieved that. The fold goes right up and equals this basting line. I'm going to, whoops, came out a little bit. I'm going to hold it with my thumb. You will be fiddly for a minute. Put the toothpick back where it belongs. And just go ahead and take that first stitch. Get as close to the fold as possible. And pull it up. And sink yourself a stitch that will anchor what you're doing. Now, because my thread matches so beautifully to my applique fabric, you really are not going to see it. I'm going to show it to you as best as I can, but I don't think you're going to see it. And when you start off, really, you're just going to maybe put one stitch. Sometimes you can put two, but one is really plenty. I'm going to take the dry end of the toothpick. I'm going to pull stitch number 2. I'm going to take the wet end of the toothpick, and I'm going to tuck it in. Once again, I want this line, this fold line, to equal the basting line. And I think you can see exactly how that looks. I'm going to hold it with my thumb, toothpick back, and I'm going to take another stitch. Now when I do this, I take my needle and I go directly down. I'm going to do this a little exaggerated. But I go directly down where my thread came up. And I try to push this fabric back just a little so that it's kind of underneath. And then I'm going to come back up in that fold, and that's called a felling stitch. Your stitches are falling right into really the grain of the fabric. And I'm going to pull it up and give it a little tug. Now, when I have taught hand applique, I need to remind every one of my students that you are not tying the Titanic to the dock. All you are doing is putting a piece of fabric onto another piece of fabric. You do not need to pull tight. You don't need to do your stitches so little. It's going to be okay. You've got all of this seam allowance. It's not going to unravel. Now, when you get to a place like this, and I'll show you that, you are going to take a few little, I'm going to say anchor stitches. But you don't have to do it so tight and so close that it makes almost like a satin stitch effect. I'm going to go ahead and take another stitch for you. You draw your needle right where that comes up, push it a little bit under, and then come up right in the fold. And give it a little tug. And I'm going to keep going. Now, you're going to notice, since you're looking at this pretty closely under the lights, and make sure you do this in a really lit atmosphere so you're not hurting your eyes. Where this basting thread comes up, you have like a little, where the fold is kind of crooked, because of course you haven't tucked this part of the seam allowance in. So don't go all the way up to the basting thread. Stop a little bit. I think you can see where I stopped. Don't catch this part in your applique thread. I'm going to pull it out again, push it away, turn my toothpick, and tuck it in. I like to tuck just like that. If you don't, you can bounce against it, make it like smooth. Sometimes you need to kind of do like this and smooth it out. Just be a little bit patient. Be kind to yourself. You don't need to learn this in 1 minute, but just kind of give it a little tuck. And I think you can see that that line follows all the way up. The fold equals the basting line, and that's all you're trying to achieve. And I'm going to just put a couple more stitches right in that fold. Now, I didn't really even see there's a little white piece right here. I didn't try to avoid that so that you won't see the thread. I just went right up in it. If you do your stitches in a way that you're kind of putting the majority of the stitch underneath, it really doesn't matter. So that's really the whole prep work and the whole stitching. You can see what you're trying to achieve is my stitching is directly on the pencil line. How do I know this piece is going to fit? Well, that's how I drew it. Directly on the pencil line. If your stitches are there, your piece is the exact size. So let's go ahead and put that aside, and I'm going to pull this over. So this is your actual piece for My First Quilt class. This is cave fabric. You may be doing it in your own fabric, but this is one of the colorways, and if you can see where this comes right in the middle, this is your middle, kind of a medallion I would call it. And but you do need to do this before you attach it to your quilt because you don't need all that extra fabric. I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to show you that, okay, there is spots that maybe I didn't exactly get it right on the line, but I'm within, I guess I'm within maybe a thread or two of the line, and that is perfectly fine. Now when you come around and you hit the inverted point, which is the down part of the heart, let me show you on this point of the heart. You don't have to start your stitches where you're not started. You can always just cut it and then pull this out. And like I said, it's the same way as you're going around the corner. Just follow, you almost follow the holes in the fabric where the basting stitches was, but just follow along with where the basting stitches are. Be conscious of where the fabric fold is. Let me go ahead and put an anchor in it. Okay, and I'm going to pull out this other stitch right here. And I'm going to very carefully, because remember you've slit down into that inverted V, I'm going to just very carefully tuck. And I'm going to be very kind to this piece because you do not want it to fray. If it does, so be it. But try hard not to get it to fray. I'm going to put a couple of stitches in it, and I am going to go down as far as I can possibly go down, staying in the basting line area. Now, I find this the easiest. When you're going down into an inverted V, I take out maybe 2 stitches. And then I will work from where I took it out, and the word is going to be finesse. I just want you to finesse. But if you take the wet end of your toothpick and you just kind of sweep in there, you can see I've swept right down into the middle. And I am going to pull that fabric back just a hair, and I'm going to put an anchor stitch in there, and usually you can see this anchor stitch because you need a little bit bigger. You've got a big deep V in that, and you've got an area that potentially you could have a bit of fraying. I actually did pretty good. I'm going to give myself a little handshake here. But that's as easy as it can be. Now that I've got that anchor stitch in there, I'm going to go ahead and dock my needle so I know where it is and the thread's out of the way. Pull the thread out of the way and take the wet part, that's the wet part over here, and just go ahead exactly the way we did it all the way around. Give it a little bump, kind of make sure you're happy with the way that folded and the placement of the fold. And you're just going to go ahead and put a couple of felling stitches in and continue exactly the way you did this part. You'll do this part the same way, and you'll do this part the same way. I'm going to go ahead and show you the last turn, and that's going to be the 90-degree angle, the bottom of the heart. This part could not possibly be any easier. Let me cut off that really obnoxious knot that I put in. Okay, let's go ahead and show you the right angle, the bottom of the heart. This could not be easier. These are probably my favorite thing to do. I love to do a nice right angle, and it's very appealing, and it's very rewarding. So just like you did, just like you started at the very beginning when we went to do the deep V, we started off, we cut the basting stitch, we did a nice anchor stitch, and I am going to work on getting to the right angle, and I'm just doing the felling stitch exactly the way I did all of the other stitches. It's really just one stitch and then the anchor stitch. I try to leave this basting thread in as long as I can. You know, it's not really holding anything here, but it's not hurting anything either. So let me just put a couple more stitches in this, and we're going to get down to the deep or the right angle. This superior thread is really it comes in a lot of colors, and it's really very easy to work with. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw that away. Now, I want this to be a nice right angle, so I'm going to work on both sides. If I pull back the piece that I started with until it's a nice straight line, you know, you got a nice little straight line right there, and then I'm going to start, and I am using the wet part of my toothpick, I'm going to just start tucking it in. If you have between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch, you're not going to need to trim that at all. And just be kind, work it a little bit, use the front and the wet part and the dry part of your toothpick. I think that looks pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch right in that point. I think that looks pretty good. and I'm going to go under that point, and I'm going to put a nice anchor stitch in there. I'm going to come around and maybe just do one stitch, and then this is how I end my applique. I just put a nice knot, just like any knot where you would maybe cross stitch, I don't know, or any sort of sewing. Give it a little tug, and then I sink my needle in between my background and my applique piece. Give it a little tug and cut it off. So just to review, we drew it on the back of the fabric. On the front of the fabric, the right side of your piece, which would be this side, this will be the back, this will be the front. So on the right side of your fabric, you placed your applique piece outside of the drawn motif on the back. Make sure you have enough of the fabric to include a seam allowance, 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch, but be generous, be kind to yourself in the beginning. Pin it on, baste it around. I use this 12 weight, but you surely can use just about any thicker fabric, and make sure it's contrasting. It just kind of gives you a little extra edge that you can see it. Baste it all the way around, give yourself a nice big knot, thread to the front, knot on the front. And go ahead and start your piece using your handy dandy toothpick. I always have many toothpicks in my kit, my applique kit, and toss them away. You'll enjoy using these. I threaded my needle with this nice needle threader. If you ever tried to work with this Superior 50 weight thread, you'll understand. If you ever use this silk thread, which is lovely to use, it's very slippy. You will need a needle threader, but the fabric of your choice, as long as it's blendable. Give yourself a little edge. If you use a thread, say I used black thread on this, if I take too big of a bite of the piece, you're going to see the black thread. This blue thread that I use blends so nicely. My stitches don't need to be ever so perfect, but give yourself a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, and make your thread or your stitches really nice. Check yourself every once in a while. Make sure that your applique stitches are right on the line of your motif. Go all the way around. Give yourself a nice even fold, smoothing nicely. Hit it with the iron when it's over, and voila, you're done. So this is called back basting. Back basting is a technique that's probably only been around maybe 10 or 12 years. I love it. If you want to continue your journey on learning to back baste, there's so many YouTubes. If you have any questions, go ahead and call the shop. We'll get you started with trying to do it. There's also other techniques that you can try if you're used to doing needle turn, if you're used to doing the starch and iron method. Any of that is correct. There is no way anybody is going to say to you that's not correct, because if it feels good, it's something you should do. So I'm Mary Jean Murphy. This is My Favorite Quilt Store. The pattern is My First Quilt, and I hope you're enjoying doing it. Give hand applique a try. It's something everybody should learn. Bye-bye. Till next time.